this is a difficult topic to explain just in half an hour. So let's start now. So this is the week of the last day of the week of mental health prevention and mental health comprehension awareness. And I would like to talk to you a little bit more about this precious resource that you have, your mental health, because you all know that if you don't feel well and you don't feel happy in your everyday life, it's very, very difficult to be productive and to dedicate your life to the career that you deserve. So, what are our objectives? What is actually a functioning human being? Um, what does it even mean? Sometimes we think, oh, a functioning human being is the human being who is happy. And there was a great talk last year on this very stage of HackConf about debugging happiness, talking about all the proven ways to feel a little bit happier. But this year, there is a clinician who works with people from different backgrounds and with different problems, who comes here and blows things a little bit and explains how all the proven ways to feel happy sometimes backfire and sometimes don't work, and this is completely understandable and completely normal. Well, what is happening? Happiness? Well, it could be summed up as a consequence of active and responsible seeking of positive emotion, engagement with others, building relationship, finding meaning, celebrating your and others' success. And you can easily think about happiness as Freud explained it, as experiencing pleasure and avoiding pain. But is it all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Not really. The problem is that very soon even Grandpa Freud figured out that many of us actually don't really do that. Most of the time, we do things, actively do things to feel shitty. And this is weird. So this is how psychotherapy began. Well, what else actually makes us happy? Well, it is proven that experiencing the flow is something that makes us very content, makes us enjoy our work. It really gives us this energy. We feel alive. We really feel connected with our job. But we think that the flow is doing something difficult with a huge challenge level, and we perceive ourselves as very skilled persons, and we experience the flow. If we are skilled and we do something difficult, we enter in the state of flow. In reality, there is a very, very, very important word over here. It's not challenge level, but perceived challenge level. It's not skill level, but perceived skill level. For many people, many of us, well, we don't go to this point when we feel that we do enough and we are capable enough. And therefore, flow is more difficult to achieve. Well, we can think about all this in terms of sociology, developmental psychology, neuroscience, genetics, and epigenetics. But in many occasions, even if we live according to our values, nothing makes us fulfill. So, we are confused sometimes because when we see Maslow's pyramid of needs, we think we are confused and we think that we just climb up the stairs and once we've achieved one thing, there's another and another step, and then on the top of it we feel self-actualized and mature enough to be functional and happy. This is not true. In clinical practice, we see all the time how people who have problems experiencing trust towards other and experiencing closeness and experiencing empathy, they could never feel safe, for instance, no matter how self-actualized they are, no matter what their self-esteem is. So it's not exactly a pyramid that you climb. It's very personal. Well, according to Eric Erickson, this might be due to some stages in maturity, and there are positive and negative outcomes. If you have negative outcome, you're pretty much screwed. According to neuroscience, it's very complicated because uh, people's nervous system is much more complicated than it is said to be in the motivational talks and some self-help articles, because it's not really taking a pew of dopamine or serotonin like you take vitamin C that will prevent you feeling bad. It's actually much more complicated. In reality, your thoughts and your physiological response to the thoughts create a closed loop in which if we think that we feel shitty, we can actually provoke our body to release stress hormones, and then the stress actually makes us feel even worse. So how do we break this loop? Well, it's complicated. So let's move on. It's important to know in what ways exactly we can crash. So we can intervene in the moment when we are not really sure what is going on with us, but something is wrong. Well, there are more than 300 ways we can break, and this is only according to diagnostic manual, which only covers the clinical conditions. Well, it's very likely to not feel okay. Actually, 13% of the people are experiencing mental health problems. Depression, 3 or 4 in 100 people are experiencing just right now. Anxiety, alcoholism, schizophrenia. But as you see from this chart, that only a couple disorders actually might, in certain conditions, lead you to lose track and lose connection with reality. Most of the conditions actually don't make you experience any disturbance in recognizes what is real or what not. Nevertheless, they are very serious. Well, in depression, this is just this one voice that tells you that everything is pointless. All the feelings that you feel are negative, or if you feel a positive feeling, you just ignore it. Depression is like being numb. It's like this monster next to you in the bed who tells you that everything is pointless and you are a failure. And then again, we use different things to cope with this. Well, I like memes, for instance. Anxiety disorders, also very, very common condition. And I can tell you that myself, I am a person who is not unfamiliar with anxiety, not only as a clinician, but also as a person who perceives most of the time. Now, for example, if I let my anxiety just go wild, I would probably think that you are all here to judge me and to tell what is wrong and what I've got wrong in this presentation. Well, it's not exactly the case. But the problem is that anxiety is not a bug, it's a feature. It's totally normal to experience anxiety. The problem is when it goes wild, and this is when we treat it. But that's why it's one of the most difficult conditions to treat, because it's actually something very normal to experience from time to time. As you see, I think that most of you have been there in some of the settings. I'm usually the chill one. Yeah. That one in the middle. Well, alcohol and drug abuse. When do we know? When our recreational habits of drinking or taking some kind of drug is actually a problem. For me as a clinician, I would say in the moment when you start self-medicating a very serious issue by ignoring it with the help of alcohol and drugs. And then again, there are multiple other ways to feel really bad, and these are not clinical conditions. There are not pills designed for them because it's a question of your mind. It's not a question of your body. Well, like too much gaming, coping with traumatic experiences, irrational fears, passive aggressive behavior, just to name a few. Damaging body image is something that we fight with, most of us, but for some people it is so incapacitating that they cannot go out of home because they feel ugly this day. Some people feel unhappy with the way they look to an extent that they think that nobody will love them the way they are. Nobody will ever feel attracted to them. They're disgusting and they don't deserve to live. But the question is that we actually really need to feel the way in which this parrot looks at himself from time to time, not all the time. It's okay to be critical, but in small amounts. The symptoms of burnout. Well, you are all young, and well, I'm not much older, but burnout is it's a very serious problem. Most people I see experience burnout up to a certain extent. And the possible causes could be lack of recognition at work, could be too much work, lack of control. But one of the causes is actually loving your job. Because when you start a job that you love, you perceive it as something perfect that will make you happy, that will make you really fulfilled. And no job can do that for you. Of course, we can be happy with our work, but it won't sell. It's impossible for a job to solve other problems for us. How can we know that we are stressed or burned out? The stress is just exhaustion, physical exhaustion. The burnout is feeling that everything that you do is meaningless, that you don't want to get up from the bed. It's very similar to depression sometimes. It's just you're dried up and nothing that you do makes you engage with your work. So it's also very important to treat it if you are perceiving this. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like Sisyphus, like working for home when people don't get well soon enough. Imposter syndrome, well, happens to much more people than you expect. It is when you feel that you don't deserve to be where you are, you don't deserve the professional recognition that you are receiving, you're worthless, and everything that you've done is a lie, and some people just believed that you are capable of doing your job. In reality, not that much. This is also not a way to feel about yourself. You can't feel about yourself this way. And talking about relationship issues, I can't even start talking about relationship issues. So I will just throw 3 memes here, and I hope you understand. People who date the wrong people, who people are passive aggressive, people who just cannot open up to anyone because they're scared of the connection. Well, if you're one of those, well, you're not alone. So, who can help? Who troubleshoots that? Who is there out there? Well, family and friends. Sometimes you think that your family and friends should understand you when you talk about your emotional problems, but actually, everybody is just as confused as you are. So the thing is not exactly to look for comprehensiveness, but just to practice talking about your problem, just being vulnerable because there is huge strength in showing vulnerability. And it gets better. You come out with your anxieties and depression, uh, talking about it to the people who are most close to you, and it becomes easier and easier. And in a certain moment, you look for help, professional or emotional, or you get better eventually. Well, older people sometimes don't understand. Most of the parents of my clients say, "Oh, well, what's that? This is just talking to somebody. It's just totally pointless. Just man up and do it." Well, the truth is that in Eastern Europe, nihilism is not a question of choice. Older people very often are very nihilistic, and they just forget that they have been young with strong emotions and problems themselves. Don't look for comprehensiveness. Look for the attachment, to reestablish attachment with the closed ones. You can use humor as much as it doesn't mask your feelings, and well, you can move on. If this doesn't help, well, of course, there is self-help. There are many places where you can look for information, books, articles, TED Talks, hackconf talks. There are two of them already about mental health. And, well, also coaching. Why I put coaching in this section? Because coaching practices usually are designed to work for as many people as possible in a way in which self-help book is designed. And they are investigated to work or marketed to work. Well, depends on the coaching practice. But the important thing is that they are tailored towards a certain framework and practice and not tailored exactly to your own personal problem. Let's not forget that we all break in a very, very unique way, no matter what. Nevertheless, we know that many people experience these feelings. Here you can see what Charles Darwin said: I'm poorly today and stupid and hate everybody and everything. Oh. So, if we cannot go through what we are experiencing through our connections, if we cannot cope with the help of all the information available, sport and exercise, mindful exercises, and everything that you can find useful, well, you can go to counseling and psychotherapy. Counseling is usually a little bit shorter term. Psychotherapy is longer term. Usually psychotherapists study 6 years in university and 4 years additional in private schools in which they learn how to debug you. Well, but how do I choose? And can I do it from home? Good questions. Well, there are many types of psychotherapy, and people who feel that the need to talk to someone often feel confused. Why they are so different? Well, there are different schools of psychotherapy, more than 50, with more than 200 different types. The most common and the most famous are psychoanalysis and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies. I will just talk about these two because I really don't have the time, but most of the therapies derive from one of each or are close to the concept of one of each. CBT is usually shorter terms. It helps you identify the patterns, the behavior patterns that you have, and teaches you to practice more healthy behaviors. Psychoanalysis doesn't care so much about certain trigger and certain behavior. Psychoanalysis cares about what is the logic inside of the person's seemingly illogical behavior. So, Look at this guy over here. Yeah, this one. Well, he's confused. This is the brain of an imaginary client of mine, Bobo, who just came this morning with a very serious problem. Bobo wrote 75 messages to his ex-girlfriend last night at 3 in the morning and got blocked. So, yeah. Well, enough with the pleasure principle. It's not pleasurable to look at your ex's Facebook page 5 times a day, but well, this doesn't reduce pain. So it's obviously something is wrong. What happened? Well, if I were a CBT therapist, I would talk to Bobo and figure out what's been going on. And he will tell me that he worked all day, all week actually, very, very busy, 12 hours a day, putting all the effort in the world in his job. And he was so tired and exhausted, and he wrote these 75 messages, and this happened. Well, then we will talk about how certain parts of the brain who are responsible for the analyzing of which activity is socially appropriate and which is not are not that active when he is exhausted. So we will do some exercises and I will tell him what to do to calm down next time it happens. And eventually he will be better. So we talk about triggers and we talk about the behavior pattern. But I'm his psychoanalyst. And we will talk about, you worked so much. How so? Is it a busy week? No, not that much. Well, what happened? Well, in the beginning of the week, Facebook spitted a photo of a old vacation of ours with my ex, and we were so happy back then. And she told me that even if we are away, if we look at the same stars, it's like we are together. And I trusted her so much that we will be always with me. And I really felt like I was a little child. I was with my family. I felt safe. I felt safe with her at that vacation. And I spent the whole week working and working and working and working. And that night, I just saw the bright moon outside of the window and I snapped and I started writing and writing and writing. And I was completely sure that after each message, she will respond. But she didn't. Well, two different approaches, both of them proven to work, both of them take time and effort, and nothing is miraculous. But, well, here we are here to help. Well, can we do it online? Well, as we mentioned, I am a part of international organization of online therapists, and we dedicate our practice to working with people who travel a lot or just prefer to receive therapy in the safe place of their home by video chat. Of course, it's not for everybody. For those of clients who don't really feel that this is enough for them, we recommend them to go to see a therapist in their town, if it's possible. If it's not, we are there to help. And of course, the very, very severe issues that cause sometimes losing contact with reality, as schizophrenia and bipolar, sometimes very, very in very rare occasions. Well, this is not exactly recommendable. Well, for people who need to take drugs or be hospitalized, there is another level of help. This is psychiatrists and clinical psychologists. Psychiatrists are the only professionals who are with medical degree, so they are the ones who give pills, so they can prescribe pills. But the case is that sometimes people really experience huge stigma about taking psychiatric medication. Sometimes people just need it for depression and anxiety. There is no stigma in that. And of course, many people who live with schizophrenia and other very, very difficult to deal with disorders, most of the time, due to good medicating, actually feel very, very well and don't need, people wouldn't even recognize that they have a chronic condition. So what I really hope is that the stigma will be totally removed very, very soon. Because nobody is actually normal. There is not such thing as normal. We are all unique in a certain way. And we have all quirks and we are strange. But can I see those professionals who usually work in a hospital setting from my home? No, because you shouldn't take health advice on the internet, and especially regarding psychiatric medication. Well, I'm here if you have questions. And if you want to ask your question more privately, you'll find all my contacts, LinkedIn, Facebook page, email address, encrypted one to be completely, private in my website. Thank you so much.
All right, so do you want to take questions from the audience? We have still 30 minutes to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, questions? Over there. Ready?
Hello.
Hello.
I wonder if there are certain psychological disorders which are only observed in modern societies, as opposed to, for example, in hunter-gatherer.
Can you talk slowly?
I wonder if there are certain psychological disorders which are only observed in modern day society, as opposed to, for example, hunter-gatherers, and vice versa, if there are certain psychological issues which only hunter-gatherers had, but which are not observed in our society.
Oh, that are existing. Whoa, there's it's a strange place where I am. That exist now and they haven't existed 100 years ago, or that have existed 100 years ago and not now. Because both, yes. It's funny thing that most neurotic neurotic behavior is as opposed to the clinical conditions that most certainly have some physiological factor. They're very fluid, and it depends a lot of the society that a person is developing in. For instance, 100 years ago, psychiatrists were dealing a lot with paralysis that was not at all connected to any physiological condition. Under hypnosis, a person could walk and talk, but because of some psychological issue, cannot perform the same one. Well, this is almost gone. We don't notice this anymore in the clinical practice. It's very rare. Well, of course, now the anxiety is just plummeting. The anxiety is really exploding right now because, well, we have very, very serious stressors. For instance, we don't feel secure in our job place because it's just we change jobs every couple of years, and our parents they worked at the same place for 40 years. there were many functional alcoholics who just kept their job. Now, if we have any issue at home or in our head, we have to deal with it immediately because job market is just so active. And there are other issues with being all the time connected, with losing contact, with physical and emotional contact with close ones, with neighbors as well, the community. Well, there are many issues that, but they are specific. So the basics, more or less, the functioning of the brain is the same. So we just find different ways to feel bad.
Right, thank you. More questions?
I'll try. Thank you for your presentation. Can you share some advice on how to, I guess, encourage someone that you notice some strange behavior or change of behavior in, let's say, friend, not in close relatives, but distant friend, colleague, whatever, that you don't have an immediate connection to or something like that?
So close friend or not that close friend?
Try both. Try both. Mostly
Oh.
for a colleague, for example, or a distant friend.
Because this is a very certain way to lose a friend, you know. People don't like to have their psychological issues pointed. I would say critical thinking, just not pointing in somebody's face that what he or she does is seemingly irrational, because inside, as I said, inside there is a very, very serious logic. If I shout at my boyfriend every day, my logic is that he's irritating me and he's being a bad boyfriend. There's, I wouldn't think that I have a psychological issue. So probably exposing person to different experiences, different points of view, and eventually, well, pointing just a little bit that you know people who went through this and things changed. But it's very tough one. I get this question a lot by email. How do I convince my husband or daughter to go to professional? It's not that easy. It's one of the tough ones, and we don't know exactly how to convince a different human being. It's something that you get to realize yourself.
Hello and thank you. Is there
Awesome.
sort of like a way to, if you've already decided that you would need to seek professional help, like choose the right professional to help you? Because you would have to build trust with that specific professional and be able to talk openly with him. And you don't want to find yourself, for example, 3 months into the sessions and find out that this is not the right person to help you. How do you go around choosing the right person to help you?
Uh, it's very personal. First of all, you go to a person who is actually very well educated in the topic. You seek a professional who's been through all the 6 years of university training, probably PhD, but not necessary. It's not necessary. And also who goes through a very serious practice. And this guarantees you that the professional is qualified. Then again, trust your gut, because sometimes we get to work with somebody who is actually very, very well qualified, but is not just a good fit. If you just feel that this person you cannot work with. You know, when you have a new colleague and you say, yeah, that's the person I would like to sit next to, and this is the person I would like to have projects with. And sometimes there is some new person who is just meh, and I don't trust. And if it's like that, the first sessions, you probably, in psychoanalytical terms, have a negative transference. Just go to equally qualified person and go with them. A very good thing is to try a few in the beginning. Most will meet you, some professionals meet you for free, for just 15-minute conversation at least, so you can decide if you are a good fit. So you pick qualified one and go to 3 or 4. If you don't like anyone, so probably the problem is not in the professionals, but and just go with if you like all of them, just go with your favorite, and yeah.
All right, we have time for one more last question over there. Jor was the first one.
No.
Check.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think mental health is very important. And I will just support what you just said. You need to try with the therapist. I personally go to, and my question is, I go to a therapist and it highly benefits me in every field of my life. I just wanted to ask you about how do we change the perception that going to a mental therapist or psychotherapist or consultancy is a bad thing, because you said that Eastern Europe there's a nihilism, which basically means that your parents are like, yeah, you're fine, but this is stuck with you because you know that suck it up and man up and do your job. How do we change the perception of the society that going there and checking if everything is okay with you is fine, and how can we speed this up?
The question is, do you want to start with people around you, or you want to start with society? Because, well, first you start with people around you. Of course, older people do not know that psychotherapy exists. For them, it's just a madhouse with all the nutcases and normal people. It, this was the understanding of their generation. The only way for them to understand, for all the people to understand, is just feeling that you are a more relaxed person. Also, it's important to point that in today's society, you cannot take 4 months of sick leave because you are just experiencing some psychosomatic issues. It's not possible. So it's very important for your career. It's very important for your relationships, and that's it. Just leave it there. Also, being open about it really changes, because um, some people really feel still ashamed, and we cannot blame them. But for those of you who are proud with the process and who are proud with the hard work they are putting in their experience under therapy, um, just spread the word, tell the others. It doesn't hurt. It's actually a pleasant experience once you get used to it.
All right. This was the last question, so please, big round of applause for Dr. Mila Petkova.
Thank you so much.